Hey, I've got Jacques Slade on the podcast, who is a sneaker expert, and I know absolutely nothing about sneakers. But I know you're also a smart guy with, I don't know, every time we've talked, you've had great things to say. You're super nice. So I thought we should talk a little bit longer. How's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited. I'm a long time fan, first time caller, as they say.
I have had a successful sneaker writer on before. Earlier episode, Pete Forrester was here, and we had a great conversation with me still knowing nothing about sneakers. So I think it's a recipe for success. Just invite people on that are experts in a field I know nothing about, and we'll have a good conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that way you get to learn a lot about other worlds, and they can, maybe influence yours in some strange way.
Yeah, we'll find out. Maybe it'll be a sneakerhead by the end of this call. We'll find out.
Okay, I'll try my best.
Things I'm really curious about first are just like what's life been like creating in this post-apocalyptic world. I mean, I'm trying not to make the podcast too much of a downer, but actually, it's funny. Each episode's becoming the intro is like, how am I feeling about the pandemic today, and how do I feel about talking about it? But I'm letting myself talk about it in a similar way to how I'm consuming content, which is like I let little bits of bad news drip throughout the day because I do feel like I need some connection to what's going on. And then I try to go do something completely unrelated and lighthearted and just for fun after that. And I've been finding that jumping back and forth like a pretty good recipe for having a relatively balanced mind throughout the day. And to some people's taste, maybe I'm talking about it too much, maybe too little, but that's been working for me. What's it been like for you?
Yeah, I think my path is pretty similar. So I've been trying my best to stay focused, but it's hard when there's just like so many different things going on, and it just seems like there's so many different elements to what's going on. And I think that is what keeps pulling me in, because you're thinking like, you think about, it's not just about you at this time. So that you're thinking about the service workers. Like I used to be a waiter when I was in high school. So like there's a certain empathy I have for like the restaurant, industry right now, and like the service industry right now. But then there's also like my family. I have older people in my family, so you're worried about them. And then you have like younger people in your family, so you're worried about them and how they're handling it, and not being at school and not being out, be able to hang with their friends, and they're stuck in the house all day. And then you have like the president and what's going on with him. And then you have like the CDC, and like you have all of these different elements to it. And so I try to stay focused on like, all right, let's just work. But then a piece of news about this comes out, and you're like, okay, I need to sort of investigate that because of X. Or you hear this and it's like, oh, I need to investigate that because of this. And so like I kind of keep feeling myself being pulled in all of these different directions and losing the focus of like, all right, what work are you going to do today in order to kind of keep things sort of normal in some sort of sense?
A way I heard it phrased recently is that this is just a really interesting time. And I think that actually it's a very ambiguous word. It doesn't mean anything too specific, but it sums it up pretty well, is that wherever you turn, something incredibly interesting is happening every single day. And things that you could dive down those rabbit holes, you could chase them as far as you want to go. And a challenge is that in other global or national or personal emergencies, there is limited utility in learning everything about it. 9/11 being one of the more recent examples that we have here in North America. You could stay up all night watching the news every day and kind of panicking about it and feeling really nervous and scared and trying to get a grasp of the situation. But the result of that was mostly just how you felt internally, is trying to bring your worldview into some sort of comfort level. Whereas now there's actually information coming out all the time that it's good to know about. It actually can, help you or save you by just finding out the right. The thing is, like, I spend all this time reading the news and listening to podcasts, hoping you'll find that one little detail that's going to save your life or your family's well-being, or, make sure that you're able to get the check that's going to keep you floating for the next while, whatever it is. There's all these little things that actually will have real life effects on us. So the bad part is there is a real payoff to following the news so close right now, because it has implications for us.
Yeah, yeah. I keep going back and forth in my mind, thinking like, have I watched too many Hollywood post-apocalyptic movies?
Or have I watched enough?
Or have I watched enough? And like, I'm wondering if that has watching those movies has shaped a lot of my reactions and how I'm consuming things, because generally in those movies, some person or some clan or group of people heard some one thing, and that was the one thing that saved them as opposed to everybody else. And so I feel like that's why I'm consuming so much about it, because exactly like you said, there may be something that comes out that changes the conversation completely. And now you have this information that's really going to make everything better for you and your loved ones. And so, so I struggle with that. Maybe it's too many movies, or maybe it's not enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. I think there's also this element of us all feeling like we are the stars of our own story, which is something that's become bigger and bigger in our culture over the last however long, 30 years or something, where it's we're the Marvel superhero of the world that we're living in right now, and whatever's happening around us is part of our bigger story, which is obviously not actually the case. It's just, I think, what we've all started to feel emotionally a little bit, and this can be a bit of a reminder there how much that's not true. And I even think that because we're all going to end up with such different experiences coming out of this, it's going to take a while to untangle us just talking to each other. Like, what was your experience? Like, what did that really feel like? How did it all pan out? I mean, you're talking about, we're thinking back to earlier jobs being in the service industry. I think about all my older jobs, and absolutely, I'm very fortunate to be in a position where we can continue doing some of the things that we do from home right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I worked
Same.
in less restaurants, more retail, but all those retail jobs, I mean, they're incredibly challenging if that's what your work every day is right now. And
Yeah.
once this is over, we're all going to have a very different story to tell about what it was like.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like this is a lot of self-reflection is going on during this time, and things like that. And I try to keep a positive spin on things as well, and think that this is also a time when people do a lot of self-evaluation, and that will come out of this better than we were when we went in. And that's kind of the hope. And I know that there are people that are falling victim to the virus, and it's affecting the world in all of these strange ways. But I have to believe that there's some positive that's going to come out of this, that is going to reshape the way we work as a society, the way that we are as individuals. Maybe it means more, it allows us to look out for each other more, to be more responsible in certain ways, whether that's, maybe it's an environmental impact. And now that we see like how much we don't have control, maybe we need to start, okay, well, let's start considering the sustainability aspect of all the things that we're doing. Like, we really need to start taking care of ourselves and this planet that we're on because of things like this. And this is an opportunity to really reevaluate how we're approaching those things. So I have to hope that there's something somewhere that's going to change us as a people and as a race for the better.
Yeah, I think undoubtedly there will be, at the very least, we'll be more prepared, I hope, for future pandemics.
For future pandemics.
This probably won't, I'm very sad to say, but this probably won't be the only time humanity faces this. We faced it before, we're going to face it again. So hopefully we'll be a little more ready for that. Fingers crossed. And also looking at in the technology world, it's going to fast track a lot of technology, which, that can also be I don't know if it's silver lining exactly. It's not like we need technology to be amazing, but as somebody that covers it, it'll give me things to talk about. That's for sure. Even an example right now, like there's something that fits into the story, but is just recently the iPhone SE version 2 was just announced. So we got a brand new iPhone coming out, and it is $400 and has the same processor as the iPhone 11 Pro and other good specs. And I look at that, I'm like, that's not necessarily part of the world's current narrative. Like the previous SE was the same price. But what's going to change is like, this will be a huge phone this year because people are going to be trying to save money on their phones. People still want a new phone, but I think a lot more people are going to go for a $400, mostly flagship phone. and a lot less are going to opt for the $1,000 option because we all got a lot less money coming in right now. So
Yep.
there's little details like that you read differently now that this is how things are. This episode of the Stalman podcast is brought to you by Modern Workplace, a podcast from Microsoft. And this is a new thing. I'm doing the sponsored segments in the video feed so you can see me and break the illusion that I've memorized them. Instead, you realize I have to read my notes to get it right. I'm sure that, like me, you appreciate finding new podcasts to listen to. Lately, I've actually mixed up my must-listen-to playlist a little bit. I've got some different shows in rotation there. And if you're looking for a new show to listen to, Modern Workplace is a monthly podcast that discusses digital transformation and the future of productivity. Each episode brings you access to business and technology leaders that are creating the future. Every show has a focused topic, a deeper conversation with a Microsoft corporate vice president, plus related news and updates. And just to give you an idea of what to expect, let me tell you about some of the topics of recent episodes that I think you might be interested in. One that I'm very interested in is remote work. Everybody's talking about it right now because a lot of us are working remotely. AI and machine learning, which once news cycles return to normal, I think will be an incredibly important topic. That is where a lot of industries are going, including, you've heard me talk about post-processing and AI and machine learning taking over that, and also the art of teamwork. Go and listen now. Just search for Modern Workplace in whatever podcast app you use. That's MODERNWORKPLACE. Or click the link in the show notes to check them out. Our thanks to Modern Workplace and Microsoft for supporting the show.
It definitely has changed people's perception of that discretionary spending has definitely changed quite a bit.
Well, and that ties into your world of sneakers quite a bit. And
Yeah.
my tangential connection to this is fashion culture, which is more through my wife's blogging. But, I've been to plenty of fashion events. It's how I know other people into sneakers. Where do you think that's going to go? That's obviously a very good example of discretionary spending. Oh, and I want to also, I liked so you're on that Disney Plus episode with Jeff Goldblum.
Yes.
I just want to say congrats. That was really cool. And
Yeah.
I liked how he discussed that discretionary, like the feeling of like why you want to buy give yourself these special little prizes like a sneaker. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I dropped the shout out in there, and people should watch that episode because it kind of ties into this conversation a little. What's going to change though?
For me, I do think I've been trying to pay a lot more attention to this, and it's really interesting because some of the like reseller sites. So reselling is a big part of sneaker culture, where people buy shoes and resell them because they're limited and things like that. And that industry is saying that there's only been like a 4% decline in sales over, during this pandemic, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
And my thought is that people are still doing the buying and selling as a way to kind of keep some sort of normalcy going. But my thought is that the higher end stuff isn't being purchased as much as it is like the more regular stuff that can kind of keep the transactions going. And that's a way deeper conversation that I need to dig into, but it's interesting. I do think that people are reevaluating the purchases that they're making, and shoes are not as important for, I think, the common consumer. So what happened with sneakers is it became a bigger, more pop culture kind of thing. And I think the pop culture moment for sneakers really was starting to explode and was becoming really bigger, and it was really cool. But in this time, I think that people have started to kind of the pop culture aspect of sneakers has kind of died down a bit. But I think the core sneaker culture consumer guy is still buying the shoes. I don't think they've necessarily stopped buying shoes quite yet, because it's almost like something that's like passionate, endemic to them. It's like their release. This is their way of kind of getting away from what's going on in society. And sneakers is kind of like that art piece or that performance or whatever it is that it means to them. So sneakers, though it is part of discretionary spending for a large population, I think there is a smaller population that just loves sneakers. Kind of like, you and I love technology and cameras. We're still buying little things. Like I bought rolling stands for my lights yesterday,
Nice.
which is something that I would
It's a good upgrade.
still do. Yeah, it was a good upgrade, but it was something I would still do regardless of whether we were in this moment or not. And I think for some people, sneakers, for people that are really into sneakers, that's what this is their kind of release.
And sneakers can stand in for virtually anything. Like we all have our thing that we are into, but clothing make for a good example because so much of it is social. Like that's what fashion is. Fashion's a social thing, as much as
Yeah.
it's a personal art expression. There wouldn't be such thing as trends if it wasn't for other people, right? The idea of how like the reasons that a new design is exciting is in relation to other people's expectations of what previous designs have looked like and how this
Right.
excites them because it's a spin on those expectations, or it breaks them, or surprises them in new ways. All of these are relationship things. So the reason that we would spend that extra money on luxury clothing or just cool shit is to show it to other people in a lot of ways. And it's not necessarily all like about like flaunting, and it's not all ego based. A lot of it's just personal expression. But I think I'm just very curious, like how will that relationship shift as people have both less income to spend on things, but also less people to show it to during the day. It's still going to be there. We're still going to want to communicate in that way.
Yeah.
But it's going to change. I don't know.
Well, I think part of it is the internet has kind of supplanted that one-to-one social interaction. So in a sense, even though we all are confined to homes, I think that the social aspect of it is still happening in a way via Instagram and via Twitter and via YouTube videos. A lot of the accounts that I follow on Instagram that are sneaker accounts are still posting every day and still posting, multiple pics of sneakers and buying the new stuff and posting it and shooting cool photography of it. Like that stuff is still happening in a sense. So though we don't have the normal social aspects, or the freedom of the normal social aspects, I should say, that we had prior, I think a lot of that social stuff is still happening, but it's just via, likes on Instagram or a retweet on Twitter.
Yeah, I think that everybody in the world is going to discover why we've loved being creators for so long now, because I've seen so many people that are jumping into even things like this format of like doing, interview conversational shows is completely exploding. Even people doing live on Instagram, people are going live every few minutes, it feels like. And it's a variation of this. It's just like eavesdropping on other people's conversations. It's been successful for a long time for a reason, because it makes you feel like you have a friendship, right? You are passively part of the conversation, and that can feel pretty rewarding. But that type of content is going to be absolutely huge right now because everybody can do it relatively easily. It's not technically very challenging or creatively all that challenging. You mostly, the value starts to be on having something worth saying and having interesting ideas. And so I think that's going to be an interesting shakeup in the fashion world as well, is people that only had visuals are probably struggling a lot right now compared to people that have opinions and something to say. Which, I mean, it's even why I invited you on. It's like, I know that you've got more to say than you're not only going to rattle off specs to me all day. You got interesting thoughts.
No. Not at all. It's very interesting though to see like the how people stepping outside of their normal confines. And maybe it's not. Maybe it's just now we're noticing it more. But you have like the thing that happened with D Nice and him doing like the Instagram live stuff, and how huge that just kind of became. And now like there's tons of DJs that were doing that kind of stuff before. Like he wasn't the first one to do it. There were DJs that were doing it before. And now you're more aware of that going on. Tory Lanez has been doing some crazy stuff on his Instagram live. And it's like really inspiring people to get out there and have more conversations and more people to speak and to talk to each other. And again, like you said, being able to get a look at those conversations has been something that I think a lot of people really, really enjoy. And it's giving them the freedom to say, hey, I could do that. I've had ideas that I wanted to talk about. Let me give it a try.
It's interesting. I noticed it also shifts the value of certain performances, like musical performances, for example. if you're going to go on tour, you're going to play the same song 1,000 times. You're going to go from city to city to city, basically do the same act over and over and get paid
Yeah.
from scratch, get paid quite a bit for each of those shows. Now, a lot of musicians are doing these live performances and, like just bedroom jam sessions and stuff like that, which is really wonderful. But I also start to realize, well, once they've done their whole catalog, they can't just, they could, but they're probably not just going to start it again and start re-performing it in that same living room. And it creates this sort of asymmetry of the value of the content. I heard somebody describe this in terms of what happened with vaudeville back in the day, that like people would get basically, they'd buy a book of jokes or a list of magic tricks, and they would have a whole career performing this one set of entertainment that they practiced over and over, and they were great at it, but they wouldn't write new jokes. Like they wouldn't come up with new material. Like they had their act and they could perform it for a lifetime because there's a new audience every night forever. And then you start recording it, and especially once you start posting it online, now any joke, as soon as one person's told it, everybody's heard it, and you can't steal the joke. You can't retell your own joke more than so many times, especially if you're posting them publicly. So it's going to shift the value of newness and creativity and originality in a way that, I don't know, we weren't seeing before this started.
Yeah, that's something that I think is very unique to, prior to this, was very unique to comedians. That's why a lot of times when you go to comedy clubs, they tell you no phones, because like these guys or these women or these comedians, they take all of this time honing this 1 hour set. And that takes, sometimes that can take years to get 1 hour worth of great content that you could then put into a special. And so they'll do that at shows like in local clubs just to work on the craft. And if, everyone's videotaping that joke, then, it's ruined, as they workshop it. Maybe they change a word or two. I read an article about how like the use of certain words in jokes and how they make them more efficient and refine them as a comedian. And I just thought that was fascinating. And like hearing you say that reminds me of like, they have to go through this process of saying the same joke over and over and over just to get it right. And if everything's recorded and it gets out there early, then that joke could be ruined before it actually gets to the point where that comedian feels like it's perfect. Like that performance
or when
is
it
perfect.
hits their Netflix special, that it would have already leaked out. I think even when in Dave Chappelle's, he was talking about some of the rehearsal of the jokes during it. But imagining that, like, let's say somebody had a cell phone video of him telling any of the jokes that were in the Netflix special. It couldn't go viral again later for the thing that he's getting paid for. It needs to all pop at once for the piece of content he's making money off of, as opposed to somebody else's cell phone video where they get all the views on their channel. Or
the perception that somebody's like, oh, he's just telling the same jokes over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. When it's really an illusion that creativity is happening on the fly every night.
Yep.
That's the magic trick.
Yep, absolutely.
But so now we're going to have to all do this ourselves, come up with our own magic tricks on how to keep things interesting day after day. I'll talk a little bit about challenges on my end. I haven't posted a new Instagram photo since this started. I don't know, maybe I will have by the time this podcast goes live. But that's just an example of like, it's this one narrow stream of social media that I just sort of froze on. I'm like, I keep not knowing what I want to do, and then and now I haven't done anything for a while, so I'm still not going to do it. I don't know. It was weird to notice that happened.
Yeah, it's been more of that with YouTube content for me. I've been posting stuff on Instagram. I've been posting stuff on Twitter, and I've been posting some stuff on YouTube, but not at the rate that I was prior to this. It's a lot more sparse, and that was part of that today. Was like my thought, over the last couple of days was like, all right, I need to get back on it. Like I almost kind of feel like I'm letting things fall apart in a sense. And so I have to regain that focus of getting back into the rhythm of creating content in a consistent basis the way that I was before, because otherwise I feel like I'll just lose it.
Yeah, is it a choice to slow down? Like, were you feeling like you should post less, or you just have kind of had enough challenges focusing or feeling inspired that you didn't feel like you had anything to post?
I think part of the challenge was focusing, and then also part of it is just like, because of everything that's going on, it just doesn't put you in the mood, I guess, to
Right.
really to do that sort of thing, or like that, something that's, I feel like it's, I don't know, I feel like because I'm paying so much attention to other things, it's pulling from that creative bucket that I have. And so that creative bucket has kind of been dry, and so it's like finding a way to dip back into that bucket and refill that bucket, so to speak, so I can create content.
Do you imagine there'll be any shift in what your content looks like? Or, I mean, not looks like is in cameras, but is there gonna be a shift of tone, do you feel like? Or is, you want to kind of keep business as usual?
Yeah, part of the delay has been me not wanting a lot, because a lot of the stuff that I do is product focused, and I've been wanting to put in effort more towards storytelling, and I think this is going to influence that as well, where I'm going to be telling more stories about the product as opposed to being like, this comes out on Friday. Because this comes out on Friday obviously works, and that's a big thing for that moment. But I think people want more than this comes out on Friday at this time. I know I want more than that. And so maybe part of that is my yearning for something more is going to be reflected in the way that I produce content as well.
It makes me think about things I've read about previous times of difficulty, like the Great Depression, for example, that fashion also shifts through this. This is the context I was reading, is that the amount of like color that people wear, the amount of sort of flamboyancy in their dress really shifts as economies go up and down. Basically, people wear more like not drab, that's more earth tones, more subtle tones during downward economic times. And then they'll like wear more expressive colors, and things will pop a little more when it's boom time and everybody's making money.
Yeah.
And I've always found that really interesting, that you could look around to just look at the people around you, and you could see how well the economy is doing by their choice of clothing. And I think that's going to be reflected in content as well. It's like how how important are the things that we talk about will reflect what's really going on, like how severe the conversations are. Something I keep thinking about is, what are those really casual content creators? Like, I've used David Dobrik as an example, who their whole thing is just about like, let's just have fun. There's nothing serious going on here. And that tone's going to shift everywhere. Even people that are like wanting to maintain, even like the goofiest shows that I like, I can feel there being a little more of a, like, look, we're all smiles and laughs right now, but we know something more serious is going on at this moment. And by not acknowledging it, it would come off as weird. I haven't seen that many people do that. Take what I would consider to be an inappropriate approach, where they're being too casual or too unaware. I mean, other than like Corona challenges or what, like, I don't know. There's some pretty dumb stuff that gets posted, but that's not actual creators. Yeah, I don't know. But I'm curious, long run, how will that shift our, I don't know. Like we definitely, maybe we kind of reached this point of like sort of peak fun, where it's like, look, we're all safe. We can just, enjoy our Netflix and chill as much as we want. But now it's like, oh wait, we're not at the end of history. We do still have to take things seriously.
Yeah, that's interesting. And hearing you say that makes me think that a lot of those changes are, I think, less about the individual and more about the collective. I think the brighter colors, that more expressiveness is often a signal of, I'm doing well, like I'm great, like,
right?
I'm really awesome right now, and so I'm wearing this super bright red shirt and these super pink
super
shoes
expensive
because I'm doing
shoes.
really great, super expensive.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing great right now.
Yeah.
And if as a collective we're all going through a moment, and I think that you tone that down, not necessarily as a I'm not doing well, I'm not doing great, but as a if like there's this huge segment of society that had this terrible time, and I was lucky enough that I didn't have to go through that, and I'm still doing great. I want to show empathy in some way, in
Yes.
another way, and by dressing down or not being as flamboyant is my way of kind of taking in that conversation and being a part of that mass. I don't want to say mass suffering, but the mass downturn or whatever it is, whatever the appropriate word is for
Yeah.
that. So it's interesting that you say that, and that's immediately what that makes me think of. But at the same time, I find myself wanting to see something that is not attached to what's going on. I want to see something that's disconnected from that. I want something that's going to allow me to escape. And a lot of my content comes from the internet. I watch Netflix and stuff like that, but a lot of my content comes from YouTube. A lot of the stuff that I watch is YouTube and Instagram and Twitter. So to be able to see something that doesn't remind me of what's going on is also nice as well.
Well, YouTube's also the only new content coming out right now. It's not like Netflix is making any shows. So, hey, everybody, we've got the exclusive deal on anything new that you want to see other than the news. So.
That's true. That's very true. YouTube is the only place for the most part.
But there's also, it's a shift as well. Not just, I mean, I think you're right that there are going to still be a lot of places where wearing bright colors are the right answer. Like it can feel right still. There's also going to be a shift, though, in terms of expensive objects. I think a great example could be watches, right? There's always been certain rooms that you could walk into where having a Rolex on your wrist could either give you a huge advantage, could basically mean you're part of the conversation, or if you walk into another room, it means you're excluded from the conversation because you're the asshole that spent that much money on a watch.
Right.
And I think what's going to change is there's going to be a lot more rooms where that $10,000 on your wrist is, 6 months rent. And for like middle class people, people that have always been used to, like, they've been planning to buy their Rolex and they just haven't got around to it yet. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, it'll just read a little bit differently to flaunt really expensive things. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, but
no, I think that's 100% accurate. There is going to be a time period during this and after this when the extravagance of luxury is not going to be aspirational anymore. It's going to be more of a sign of waste or a sign of opulence. And that's not the time period that we're in or that we will be in after this is over. So I think you're 100% correct in that.
And I think that's all defined by whether or not people can see a path towards getting that themselves. I think that's what can drive that frustration. If we feel like we actually live in a somewhat free market where there is a chance that if we do everything right, hopefully we could have, live the American dream, like have everything we see on Instagram.
Right.
But if it feels like that path is closed to us, which at this moment it does for a lot of people, there's just, you just can't go to work. Like it's nothing personal. Your job's closed. So that's, that's blocking your path to that cool watch or those great sneakers. It's funny, actually, I noticed that I started getting a lot more emails from StockX talking about watches lately. Maybe that's even why it's on my mind. I'm like, they're really pushing those watches right now.
They're definitely pushing the watches right now for 100%. But I think you're right. Like they're, I think here in the US, there's like 6 million people filed for unemployment in like a week or something like that. So like it's going to like, with those
the numbers. Yeah, don't look at the numbers now if the last one you saw was 6.
Yeah. So I'm saying like that kind of gives you an idea of of where things are headed and how people are going to be struggling. I've been there. I've been on unemployment. I know how hard it is. I know that it's barely any money. So I know the struggle that comes along with that and the challenges that you face when you're in that position. And for me to come outside in some Gucci loafers and a Rolex and a Louis Vuitton jacket, that's it's really tone deaf.
Yeah, it's not gonna. And I don't mean to say it to condemn anybody that still wants to wear the Gucci loafers they already have and love. People are still gonna wear their
Yeah.
favorite things. But I think by not talking about it, like if I were to just not acknowledge it on this show that's usually about tech and cameras or something, I feel like it's it. Previously you could leave it unacknowledged because there definitely are a group of people listening that don't have access to the things you're talking about, but like I was saying, they can dream towards it, like they can see it coming.
Yeah.
And now it's like, or I know that as I speak, most people that are listening, this applies to. It's not at all a smaller segmented group. It's not only a few people that can relate to the challenges of like, well, I don't know how I'm going to get to where I was hoping to get to anymore. We're all in that boat. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like the right time to acknowledge it. And I don't know if I'm saying any of the right things about it, but
Yeah, no, and I agree. It's not to condemn them. It's not to condemn anybody that has those things and that worked hard for those things. And I totally understand and get that. But there are times when we need to take a broader look outside of ourselves and take the community into the conversation. And I think this is one of those times. And eventually we'll get out of that. And I don't know when that is or what day that's going to be, but I do think, acknowledging what's going on is important for sure.
let's say that we acknowledged it enough and try to talk about something lighter for a few minutes before
Let's do it.
before I circle back.
It.
Just tell me a bit about YouTube lately. Like, how has YouTube life? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a darker topic, depending on how you feel on YouTube. But like, what's it like to be a creator in the last year?
It's been great. It's been really good to be a creator. I do think that we're still at the very beginning of what's possible for a creator and what creators can do. We're starting to see a lot more creators being accepted by traditional media, which is really exciting for me. That's a path I definitely want to take. I want to dig more into like the traditional media side and represent more in that area, in addition to being able to still be my own personal creator. I think a lot of the creators that we know and love, the actors and directors and all of those things, they were so limited to only being able to do certain things in traditional media. And that's the only place we ever saw them. And now you're starting to see them create things on their own and on YouTube. And I feel like that conversation is going to go the other way as well, where you see creators like you and I being able to dip into the traditional media world and create there as well, from both front and behind the camera, but being able to traverse between those two worlds, which I think is really, really exciting. I think we're just starting to see aspects of that. You see, like Lily had her talk show. You have Liza doing things and being more accepted into like the traditional media world and still being able to create on YouTube. So like those things, I see those coming together, and for me, that's really, really exciting.
Well, and it's amazing that at the same time as all that's happening, we're seeing the opposite happen, where all the TV show hosts are now having to be YouTuber creators at home with their iPhones, getting their partner just to hold the camera for them, and their kids are the laugh track. And that has been so interesting just to see who does it well, almost all of them do it poorly. It's just like, it's so fun. I mean, I get it, because we had to spend a lot of time and attention struggling to, get these A-roll setups that look pretty decent right now, and figuring out how the camera works and how to edit it and all that. But yeah, it's very interesting watching the reverse path happen. And who would have ever thought that would be a reality? Like, this was not on my bingo card. I didn't see this coming at all.
Not at all. Not at all. It's really, it's actually kind of cool, because you see, I think it'll give, and this is not a judgment call here, but I think that the traditional industry didn't necessarily respect the work that goes into what we create. And I think now they're more aware than ever
I
of
sure hope so.
the
Yeah.
challenges and the work that goes into us creating on this platform. Like, it isn't just like set up a camera and go. It's a lot more difficult than that, with lighting and making sure sound is correct, and making sure your environment looks great, and making sure you remember to turn on the audio and record audio and all of those things. Like, all of those things are starting. I think that industry is really getting a better idea of what it takes to do that. Yes, we may not be as complicated as your setups, but the thought process and the work that goes into it is, I would say, almost identical.
It's definitely going to be an artifact of all of this, is that a lot of those workflows, I bet, will simplify as well. They're not necessarily, I mean, late night shows, I don't know, maybe they already are simple enough. Like, those are relatively not complicated productions, but as people, go buy a bunch of consumer level cameras and like smaller, simpler hardware and make stuff at home, when they go back to their big shows, they'll take notes about, like, this has all come a very long way, and maybe we don't have to do it the way that we always did. And
Yep.
I'm sure it's going to rub off in the way that things are created. And actually, an interesting side effect of that is probably that there'll be some more, I mean, this is maybe a downside, there'll be also more shrinking of crews as well, which has been, I mean, that's been a challenge of anybody working in the production industry for a very long time right now, that you can do really good stuff with not a lot of people. At the same time, I mean, I also see it as a huge opportunity. It's been how we've been able to have a career, is by being able to be in a really small crew, not very many people, which means that our margins are really good compared to a bigger project that has a higher budget, but that's divided amongst 60 people. So I think, the thing I throw around of full stack creator, I think, has never been a better time to understand the full creative stack and be able to do it all yourself.
Yeah, we are very unique in that way, and I think now is a time that people will start to realize more and more what it takes for us to do what we do. Especially, like, I feel like the brands now, when they see what they're getting from us versus what these full-on television production shows are putting out on YouTube right now, and when they see the difference, and hopefully that is a moment of revelation for them, like, oh, like, wow, these guys really are doing a lot more than what we thought they were doing.
For sure. I always want to jump in there when I see Jim from The Office has his new hit show from his desk at home. And I love that it just is that, like, YouTuber startup attitude. It's like, hey, I got a camera, I can start talking. And I love that he did that, but I just want to get in there and, like, fix his mic placement and fix the lighting a little bit. And, like, oh man, this could be so good with not that much more effort. And yeah, it's funny. I don't know, maybe I could just be a consultant on these shows.
I'm saying that a whole new career. I wonder how much of this, like you and I are talking now, because obviously a lot of the shows are doing this now. I wonder how much of this will extend when they go back into regular production. Will they still be doing like these Zoom or Skype interviews with people because they don't have access, or because it's easier than a celebrity coming to flying into LA or flying into New York?
Something I meant to put this in I just did a video about the latest iPad, and I was going to say this and forgot. This is really highlighting why recent Apple upgrades, like putting professional quality microphones in the new MacBook Pro and in the new iPad Pro, nobody really talked about it that much. Nobody really cared. But now that all of broadcast television is being shot on mobile devices, mostly on iPhones, the image quality and the sound quality coming out of the default phones that we all buy suddenly is defining mass media. Like, that is how good of quality we're going to see all night long, because so if Apple has I don't know, there's an example, like there's sometimes white balance flickering. Now it's not just our home videos that have this white balance going up and down. Now it's, I was going to say Jon Stewart. He's not on TV anymore. Stephen Colbert, it's Trevor Noah that are like, they're having both the benefits and the artifacts coming out of their cell phones now. So those little details that seemed relatively unimportant are,
Yeah.
who uses their laptop to record audio? Well, now everybody when they join their Zoom meeting in the morning. So
Yep, it's going to be a big deal. It's good. Like that. Those things are becoming more and more um, important to like the general public, and I'm excited to see like what comes next from the technology companies now that they're seeing these tools used by really a larger audience. It seemed very like it was very niche usually. They're like creators like you and I using it, and every once in a while people that work from home like they would use it, but now you're seeing like the mass public use it, and all this data is being filtered back to these manufacturers. Then how are they going to use that to make the next product cycle even better?
well, these same implications I was just talking about also trickle downstream to everybody's personal interactions now too. It's like, how good is your FaceTime call? Because if it's terrible when you're calling your family that you haven't seen in real life in weeks, you
Yeah.
want it to be good. It makes a huge difference. And it can, that idea of like the image feeling real can start to have emotional effects on people and how connected they feel to the people that they can't be around right now too. I mean, I don't know. It's just really interesting how important tech details about tech are becoming all of a
Yeah.
sudden that before may have felt like luxuries, but now it's our lifeline to the real world that, we're all living in our apartments.
Absolutely. 100%.
What about your tech side? Like, tell me what you're liking lately. We were chatting a little before all this started on Twitter. You're asking me about some new gear. What have you got?
Yeah.
What did you change in your setup recently, and what are you planning on doing?
Well, I've been doing more set design changes lately than anything else. I was kind of I had this like white wall set up, and I've been using that for a long time. So probably for like the last 6 months, I've been rearranging this room that I'm in like over and over and over. And so like this is the latest look here. Not sure how long this is going to stay. But tech wise, I'm looking to make a few upgrades around here. Like, so I have the Black Magic camera, the 4K, and I've been using that off and on. But I'm terrible at color, so trying to match that with like the A7 threes has been a bit of a challenge. I'm also thinking about doing a podcast, which I've talked to you about a little bit on Twitter. So I'm looking to upgrade some of like my audio setup, like because right now I'm using the NTG2, but I want to get like an actual microphone as opposed to like a shotgun to find something that's a little more.
I mean, it
appropriate
is
for
an
voice.
actual microphone.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is true. That is
Yeah.
true. I'm sorry. A more,
Of course,
more,
yeah, a more
like, radio
targeted for
voice.
the use that you're going for. I get it.
Yeah. And then that's probably going to lead to me upgrading my audio. I'm using the H6 now. I've been going back and forth between the Zoom F6 and the Mix Pre 3. Funny, like when I was talking to you on Twitter, John texted me and was like, Mix Pre 3 all day. Don't even worry about it. Just get the Mix Pre 3. He's like,
I'm sure
"Don't
he's
even-"
part of the reason that I got it too. I'm like, oh, John uses it. It must be good.
Yeah, exactly. So he was like, yeah, Mix P3 all day. And he telling me he was talking about the 32-bit float, which I was talking to you about as well, which just has blown my mind. I've been watching like tons of YouTube videos about it.
Well, I want to expand on that for a second. If anybody's wondering about it themselves. So I know it was on the podcast. I know I talked about it a little before when I was testing the new version of the Mix Pre 3. Because I have the last generation of the version 1, so I don't have the 32-bit float. They sent me a review unit, so I got to test it. I'm sure at least 1 or 2 episodes of the podcast were recorded with it. What you'll notice about it is that it's kind of like shooting RAW. You have tons of latitude so that if you screw anything up in post, you're able to recover it. But I will say that you should still buy the Mix Pre 3. It's awesome. But I bet you'll end up not recording in 32-bit float that often because your files get a lot bigger, and it only ends up mattering if you really screw something up. And on the sound devices, the preamps are so quiet and clean that you can just record at like half level. You can record as quiet as you want to and turn it all the way up later, and it's going to sound great. Like, you can still make it too loud. That's a very possible way to make a mistake. But if you know what you're doing, I don't know. You can usually avoid that. Like just don't make it too loud, and then you can save a ton of file space. So it's an awesome feature. I think what it makes sense for is people doing live sound. That's a great example. Like if you're like walking around or you're at a concert or whatever, and all of a sudden everything blows up, like the levels rise 3 times. Now you're able to save that, and you've got this like infinite cushion in every direction. But when we're talking like this at a really consistent level, the difference between the loudest and quietest part isn't very different. You don't find a lot of advantages. So I'm just throwing it out there. Don't necessarily choose based on that one feature.
Based on it. Well, the Zoom has 32-bit float too.
Yeah, right. So I guess it doesn't matter. Don't choose on that feature at all because it doesn't matter.
I do like the form factor of the Mix Pre more than I like the form factor of the Zoom. Though I thought the Zoom was bigger than it actually is. I watched a video last night, and a guy actually had it in his hand as opposed to it just like sitting on a table or like that, or it being in product pictures. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's way smaller than I thought it was. Because like the pictures make it look huge. It looks massive in most of the images that you see. But then I was like, oh, maybe I will. But then I still like the thin profile of the Mix Pre 3 versus the double stacked.
Well, here's the other thing I like a little more about sound devices in general, or why I chose to trust them. They haven't made a bad product, really. I mean, everything they've made has been amazing and real professional quality, where Zoom has been really innovative. Like they're a little more like they're the Samsung, and sound devices is the Apple. Got it. Sound devices is always premium. It's usually a bit more expensive. Zoom brings out a lot of really cool new features. They really innovated with like the H4n. That was a big deal for me. Now the H6 is an extension of that. But the preamps are all a little noisier. Like the quality's not necessarily there. And from everything I've heard, which is the one you're looking at? The F6, is that what it's called?
F6
is kind of on par. Like the sound quality is basically there. It's just because they've had a history to me of having some duds that weren't, not duds, but more flaws in their product. That's why I'm like, okay, I think sound devices is going to be more consistently amazing.
Yeah, like one thing that I like the F6, but one of like just a small feature thing of like it doesn't power off by itself, which is something that I had like with the Tascam, which seems like for something like this it would do, especially that I don't know. I've had the Tascam DR40, like that's what I started with. Like that was the first audio recorder that I bought, and I love the feature that like it just goes off by itself if it's been on for more than 5 or 10 minutes and you're not using it. Right. And I thought like that's something you could activate with the H6 because it seems like it's still in that same product category. Like the Mix Pre and the F6 are a little bit more like, all right, you can use these on a pro in a pro situation, where these feel like more consumer based, like the
a little more plastic in them.
Yeah. And I was just like, why can't you do that? It seems weird, and it's such a small firmware change, but I've complained to them enough about it. Obviously, they're not going to do it. They've received enough tweets from me about it. So,
well, speaking of what you started with, tell me a bit about how you got started with YouTube. Because like we know each other pretty recently. You know, we met in person a few times, but like, what's your older background with YouTube?
Oh, so I started on YouTube back in 2011, 2010. Nice. Sorry, 2010. It's been a long time. So I was writing for a sneaker website. I got a job writing for a sneaker website in December of 2009. And I had done some prior like acting and TV and movie stuff. And so I was watching a lot of the sneaker content on YouTube at the time, and none of it was really highly produced, I should say. And so my thought was like, oh, okay, well, let's try and bring some of the knowledge that I have from doing film and TV and bring that into YouTube. And so in March of 2010, I put up my first YouTube video for the website that I was working for. And it was like this entertainment news style, like green screen with like the picture in picture thing, kind of like a news. So yeah, a very, very weatherman news show. But it was like nobody in sneakers was doing that at the time. And so that kind of made a name for me because nobody was doing that. And so that just led to me just kind of pushing the quality of what I was doing and trying to make the production aspect better and better, which separated me at the time from everything else that was going on. So like, because this was before Complex was doing sneaker shopping. This was before Nice Kicks was doing Sneak Peek. Like, there was no professionally produced sneaker content at the time when I was doing this. It was more of guys doing like stuff inside their bedrooms or in their living rooms or at the store and stuff like that. It wasn't, none of it was professionally produced. And I was early enough to kind of push that perspective to the sneaker world. Not that I was doing it, but that was the thought behind it. It still looked terrible, but it was a step up from what the sneaker community was expecting at the time. And
well, I still think it gives you an advantage being able to do something that is really professional by yourself. I mean, it means that you're able to keep making the show now without anybody coming over. And this is something I always used to bug Pete about before he was doing the show for High Snobiety. And it was always like, well, you can only do what they give you permission to do. And you know what, they hire camera people to shoot and editors to edit. And you've got a great personality and all this knowledge, but if you can't create it yourself, then you're limited to what they, want, what they're willing to put out. And now all of a sudden it's become like, it's very manifest, because it's like, well, if you can't make it yourself, nobody else is going to make it for you.
Yeah, that's something that I've been telling a lot of my friends that they should start creating. I have a friend that's a songwriter, so she writes songs for like television, like kids' TV shows and stuff like that. And I've been telling her to document the process and put it on YouTube and learn about all this editing stuff, because they always ask me like, how did you do this and how did you? I'm like, I literally watch YouTube videos. Like I watch YouTube videos on how to edit. Like I bought a little point and shoot camera. I bought a green fabric from Joann's, and I bought some cheap lights from Target. Like that was my original setup. And I learned in motion how to create the little picture in picture thing. And like, that's how I got going. And a lot of people see what it is now. And I'm like, yo, you got to start at the bottom and build up. Like that's me. And you have way more tools now than I did. Like back in 2009, 2010, like I didn't have any of this stuff. I didn't have a teleprompter. I had literally the college dorm room lights, the ones with like 3 lights on it, like the ones that your parents buy you when you get into your dorm room. That's what I used to light myself for the very first episode that I shot. And I used those for probably 6 months to a year.
Yeah. I think it's hard to remember that it was only 10 years ago, you couldn't buy the stuff to do the level of production we're doing without being in the professional world. Like to get soft light, you'd have to go buy a Kino Flow fluorescent kit that cost you $4,000 or $5,000. There was no small LEDs, or you'd use hot lights, which you could get affordably, but they're really hot and potentially dangerous. Like using in small spaces is a problem. The cameras weren't as good. The mic options weren't as good. Preamps have gotten like autofocus, monitors, like Small HD is still a new company, relatively speaking. So much of this stuff just did not exist. And holy cow, like, it takes so much less money to go so far now for, I don't know, like if I think of it in my head, like, less than $1,000, you can look 100% professional.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You could spend $1,000 right now and have a setup that rivals probably anybody else on YouTube.
Yeah. The setups that both of us use, you could do something indistinguishable for about $1,000.
Yep. As opposed to I don't even want to talk about how much it costs.
Yeah. Well, the worst part of the parts that you buy that you don't end up using either. It's, not all of it turns out to be what you hoped it would. So
yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
Jacques, I really appreciate you coming on today. This was fun to chat.
Absolutely. And thank you. Just before we go, thank you for being the creator that you are. I love the aesthetic of the work that you do. And I know I've probably told you this before, but I think it's worth acknowledging now. I love the aesthetic of the work that you do, especially the video work. I think it has a certain look, has a certain feel. And I think you're really good at curating that style and that look. And also, I appreciate the fact that you're one of the few creators that wears glasses. So I'm always
that's my greatest contribution to the community.
I'm always looking at how you light things, because it's a lot more difficult to light things when you wear glasses versus not wearing glasses. Yes, exactly. That right there. So I watch a lot of your stuff, kind of like finding little bits and nuggets to see like where's the light placement, how is he lighting this, because the reflection in the glasses is such a hard thing to get correct. So I appreciate that.
Do you get people writing in and asking if your glasses are real? Because I get that all the time.
Yes. Do you really wear glasses? Yes.
It would be weird if you made it your whole thing. Like, I get that some people just occasionally wear fake glasses as a fashion thing, but it'd be weird if you made it your whole public image and it wasn't real. That would be a little more strange.
To be fair, I didn't wear glasses at first when I first started wearing these. I didn't have any vision problems, but over time it got worse, and now I have to wear them. So I started out wearing them in a couple of videos just for fun, and I thought it was cool, and I started wearing them more often. But then I got to the point where I was like, oh, you actually need glasses, and so now I still
think they're cool.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks again, Jacques. I'll see you on YouTube and Twitter.
Yep. See you on YouTube and Twitter. Yes.